The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Donald Trump, Republican presidential candidate, our good buddy, went on MSNBC's Morning Joe. He would not stop talking about this completely absurd Muslim travel ban that he's been suggesting, proposing, whatever. And the segment ended up getting pretty abruptly interrupted and stopped, and they went to commercial. Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough were talking to Trump about how this is a completely absurd idea and how it just makes no sense and it's all crazy. And Trump started one of his soliloquies, one of his monologues, his never-ending speeches that go on and on and on. And Joe Scarborough said to Trump, "You got to stop talking. We ask questions here or we're going to break." Trump did not stop, and ultimately they did go to break. Let's take a look at the video.
Chamber of Commerce is going to go crazy, but Paris is no longer the same city it was. They have sections in Paris that are radicalized where the police refuse to go there. They're petrified. The police refuse to go in there. We have places in London and other places that are so radicalized that the police are afraid for their own lives. We have to be very smart and very vigilant. We have to find out who gave this guy $28,000, put it in his account. How many other $28,000 checks were made? Are there thousands all over the country? When you say you're afraid, I think you should be afraid. You should be afraid of the other side, not my side. Well, I want to get our hands around a very difficult situation.
All right, Donald.
Hey, Joe,
Don, you got to let us ask questions. You can't just talk. No, you got to let us actually ask questions. You're just talking. All Muslims. Donald, you're not going to keep talking. We will go to break if you keep talking. We're going to ask you questions. All right, go to break. Go to break, everybody. Go to break. Go to break. Go to break right now. We'll be.
Oh boy, the awkwardness. I don't know, to add just even more awkwardness. I don't know if you noticed, but if you were watching that, during a bunch of Trump's soliloquy, there was an ad for a stool softener playing in the background of the MSNBC shot. I mean, just every element about that bizarre, Lewis.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I think Joe was getting clearly very angry, and you can't do that. You know, you have to kind of keep a cooler head, and it makes for some compelling commentary. But Dave, I mean, you got to chill a bit here, right? What do you expect when Donald Trump is on with you?
You do have to, but can nobody see Trump's ideas for what they are? Trump is more or less the only candidate to have widespread support from the white supremacist community, including even former KKK leader David Duke. We're going to talk to Chauncey DeVega about this a little bit later. The white supremacists and KKK types are only talking about Donald Trump. You don't hear the KKK types talking about Bernie or about Lindsey Graham or Jeb Bush or whoever. Replace the word Muslim with Jew or black in this and tell me what it sounds like. And we have a real problem with Muslim extremism already. And it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. I mean, that's undeniable. But this type of rhetoric and speeches and ideas will only create more extremism. And earlier in this interview with Trump, Mika Brzezinski said, "Aren't you giving ISIS what they want?" And absolutely, when you say, hey, look at what they're doing in the U.S., they've got a Republican candidate who says ban Muslim travel. That helps them recruit. We have to understand that.
Yes, that is what they want. They want people to be afraid. Donald Trump is making people afraid. I'm not convinced that Donald Trump is aware of the consequences of what he's doing. I think he's still in entertainer mode, and he's, realizing now that he can just keep saying crazier and crazier things and garnering more and more support.
And he does say them in a way that slightly softens them. I mean, if you're a high information voter or even a medium information voter, you see through the absurdity of what it is Donald Trump is saying. But if you're a low information voter and you hear him use some of the phrases of, hey, we're going to have a country and we're going to have borders and we'll have a wall, but it'll have a beautiful door in it. When you don't realize the wall idea for its full absurdity and what it represents, Trump is good at talking in a way that does sound inoffensive to low information voters.
I guess I find that hard to believe because when I hear it, I hear what it is, and I think to myself, how can anyone think that this is rational? Well, I don't know, Dave. I mean, I guess we'll be hearing from them.
Apparently, 29% of all Republicans think what Trump is saying is quite rational because he still has 29% support from in the broader Republican primary polls. Let's stick with this topic of Donald Trump's idea of banning all Muslim travel to the United States. The national spokesperson for Donald Trump's presidential campaign seems to just not care at all when she was told how absurd this idea is by none other than right-winger S.E. Cupp. Okay, this was not some confrontation with a lefty. This was a confrontation with right-winger S.E. Cupp. She responded by saying, "Who cares, or so what, they're Muslims." I'm going to play the video for you here. This is video of Katrina Pierson. She was interviewed alongside S.E. Cupp, and she said, "So what? These are Muslims. Why do we care if we're being mean to Muslims or offending Muslims or whatever? So what? After all, they are Muslims." Let's take a look at the video. Let's listen to the audio.
All Donald Trump is saying is we need to put a pause on bringing more people into this country until those things are put into place. And it's just that simple.
It's not that simple, and that's why so many people on both sides of the aisle have come out and summarily denounced this. It's not nothing new, as you say. There really is something new to the idea of banning an entire religious group from entering the country as a pause or temporarily, as it may be. That is new. That is not who we are. That's not what we do. It's against the Immigration and Nationality Act. It's completely illegal, and it would conflict with parts of the Constitution involving due process and parts of the Constitution involving the freedom of religion. So it would be a big hurdle for Donald Trump to convince this Congress or any Congress to allow the United States to ban people based on their religion from entering the country. And peddling this unconservative, un-American, unconstitutional garbage has got to stop. We need Republicans to win again,
in the Congress
and he is
for
making that impossible.
Long before Donald Trump said anything, S.E. And yes, this country has done it before. Never in United States history have we ever allowed insurgents to come across these borders, and it's worse now today.
No one's talking about allowing insurgents. You're talking about not allowing
leading it.
Regular Muslims. That's what you're talking about. No one's talking about insurgents. Who wants insurgents
from
to
Arab
come over?
nations. You know what? So what? They're Muslim. The issue here is that if you're not trying to,
live in, Katrina.
No, it is. But it is, S.E., simply because you have people coming across through the refugee system and the visa system, including the woman that came in San Bernardino on a visa system, as well as some of the 9/11 hijackers. We have to put a pause to figure out how we could better vet these people.
Yeah.
Okay, Katrina, S.E., thanks.
Who cares, Lewis? They're Muslims after all. It doesn't matter that we're keeping just reasonable, normal people out of this country based merely on their religious affiliation, which, by the way, is completely self-professed and unprovable. So what? After all, they're only Muslims.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that kind of sums up the mentality of Trump supporters. But at the same time, there are going to be people who make it through, right? And who, I guess, the vetting process fails. And some of these people do get through. Alternatively, of course, some of them are radicalized after the fact. But, we're talking about a very small percentage here, if any. And many of these people really do need help and they need a place to live. So this could happen with people who are citizens right now who have not entered, could become radicalized. It's kind of a risk. A small one, but it's a risk we kind of have to take, right?
It's one of these things where you say, hey, if we just ban everybody from coming to the U.S. from any countries, then the chance of having people who come to the U.S. legally commit acts of terror is zero, because anyone who's in the U.S. would be here illegally if they came from another country. Yeah, but this is not the real world, right? And the problem is that it is against everything that the United States was built on. It is, as S.E. Cupp, I'm agreeing with S.E. Cupp. As S.E. Cupp said, this does appear to be unconstitutional to discriminate against people based merely on their religious affiliation. There's nothing American about this, and this helps ISIS. That is the key thing.
Yeah.
This is going to be used for ISIS recruiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm also going to agree with Katrina that there are people in Congress that want this type of thing to happen.
Sure, yeah.
And I don't think Donald Trump would have an impossible time convincing some Congress members that this is a good idea. Ultimately,
it would never pass.
It would never happen. And that's what's so fascinating about this is Donald Trump can throw out an idea that will never happen, and everyone takes it so seriously that it's a national headline for a week.
it takes a special kind of person to be spokesperson for Donald Trump's presidential campaign, doesn't it? I mean, that is a job that I would be interested in finding out more about the individuals that
wonder how much it pays.
Yeah, I do wonder how much it pays. Is Donald Trump threatening to run as an independent? You might remember that pledge that Donald Trump signed, which said that he would ultimately, if not the winner of the Republican Party himself, support the eventual winner of the Republican Party's presidential nomination process. As we know, Lewis, that pledge is completely non-binding, and Donald Trump, I mean, if he runs outside of the Republican Party can't do anything at all about what he's doing because he's not running as a Republican. And we have some new statements from Trump that suggest maybe he is still thinking about running as an independent. Let's put this tweet up for our audience to see. Donald Trump tweeted yesterday, "A new poll indicates that 68% of my supporters would vote for me if I departed the Republican Party and ran as an independent." If you click on the link, it goes to a USA Today Suffolk University poll, which indeed claims that 68% of Trump supporters would vote for him if he were to leave the Republican Party and run as an independent. 18% of Trump supporters, according to that USA Today poll, said, no, I would only support Trump if Trump is a Republican. And the rest, I guess 14%, say they are undecided or unsure whether they would vote for Trump as an independent. This would be a dream come true. And this is a very bad sign for Republicans. I know the pledge, Lewis, but ultimately the pledge is basically meaningless if Trump decides he's going to stay in this thing, Republican nominee or not.
Yeah, I think that his support, I mean, we know he's going to maintain most of his support because, well, it's just crazy zealots that are behind him. It's like a cult. There's
a lot of Trump supporters that would not support anybody else because nobody else is saying ban Muslims. Nobody else is saying register Muslims. Nobody else is saying Mexicans are rapists, although some I'm sure are good people. So there is a crowd that would either not vote at all or support Donald Trump. And I think those are the people responsible for saying, yeah, independent, Republican, whatever, I'll vote for Trump.
And that's why this is great. Please let him run as an independent. I think it would be wonderful for whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Let's just run through the hypothetical numbers. Back in 2012, Mitt Romney defeated President Obama in North Carolina, 51-48. So the vote totals were 2.275 million votes for Mitt Romney and 2.178 million votes for President Obama. Trump's national average support right now, Trump's average support in the North Carolina Republican primary is 26%, okay? 68% of Trump supporters say they would vote for him as an independent. That's about 17% of the North Carolina Republican vote. Let's be conservative. If Trump were to have run as an independent in North Carolina in 2012 and picked off not 17% of the Republican vote, but just 14% of the Republican vote, very conservative, that would have swung North Carolina from Romney to Obama by shifting 318,000 votes from Romney to Trump. This matters. This can make a difference. And this is just one example, Lewis, North Carolina from 2012. Trump could single-handedly, as an independent, hand the election to the eventual Democratic nominee.
Yeah, incredible. I wonder if this was factored into that prediction that we talked about yesterday from Western Illinois University.
Interesting.
That said it would be
Bernie
overwhelmingly winning over Bush. So with Trump as an independent, I think we can say that the Democrats are in much better shape if that happens.
Send me your thoughts about this. Are we missing something in realizing that Trump as an independent really helps the Democrats? Is there something that we are not thinking about here? Let us know. I'm on Twitter at @tpacman, and Lewis is on Twitter at @LewisMotamedy.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and our listeners through something called membership. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's new member of the day, and I don't know how to pronounce this last name, Lewis. Today's new member of the day is Alexei Ilonen. I really do not know how to pronounce this. It is Ylonen. Any ideas, Lewis, on this one?
Sorry, I can't help you.
All right. Well, Alexei, I am sure, is the pronunciation of the first name. Thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. Join Alexei at davidpakman.com/membership. And for a few more days, if you go to davidpakman.com/calendar16, you can get this 2016 Hatriot Mail calendar for free with your yearly membership. No better deal than that. Lewis has already purchased 17,000 calendars. Our printer is loving it. I mean, they're just absolutely fascinated by the amount of business Lewis has directed to them. davidpakman.com/calendar16. It is time for Hatriot Mail. You remember what Hatriot Mail is, right?
Hatriot Mail, your break from the tyranny of unbiased independent media. Because knowledge and information are just communist conspiracies. Hatriot Mail, written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
This week on Hatriot Mail, it is an apocalyptic conspiracy theory. I love these. It's been a while since we had one of these, and I don't want to delay playing it for you any further. Let's take a listen.
The two idiots in this show have no clue about anything. Jesus is coming soon, but the tribulation has to happen first, and that is coming very soon. Your own president and Hillary Clinton have been working behind Americans' backs to destroy the country. A huge cataclysmic event, replete with nuclear incidents and biblical-scale earthquakes, are on the horizon. But of course, one needs to believe in Jesus to know the truth. All the Baal worshippers will never see it coming. Jesus warns to watch. If you haven't found Jesus, you're going to go through a heap of trouble.
Cataclysmic and replete, part of this Hatriot Mail. The big difference between this Hatriot Mail and many others, Lewis, I know you know what I'm thinking, the grammar and spelling are actually quite good.
Yes, well, you have, I don't know, someone who reads the Bible quite a bit, and perhaps that translates to having a firmer grasp on the English language. Although, Dave, when I've read Bible passages, they tend to confuse me a bit.
Yeah, I can't figure out what's going on. I always get confused also. Isn't tribulation a sexual move? I never remember that.
Is that one in the Kama Sutra, maybe?
I don't know. I'm not sure if tribulation is part of a conspiracy theory or something. Well, yeah, anyway. Don't forget that if you want Hatriot Mail at home every day for 2016, the 2016 Hatriot Mail calendars are available. They have 13 different images created by our viewers related to Hatriot Mail, and it is just fantastic, Lewis. davidpakman.com/calendar16, where you can get those Hatriot Mail calendars, get them signed, get them unsigned, get it free with a membership, whatever you want, davidpakman.com/calendar16. Methane emissions from the Barnett Shale in North Texas are at least 90% higher than government estimates. This conclusion comes from a new peer-reviewed study that was published a couple of days ago in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This paper is a 20 co-author written paper involving researchers from 13 different institutions, involving universities and government labs and private research firms and so many others. And overall, the 2-year study found that the methane emissions from the Barnett Shale are nearly twice as much as estimated by the EPA's greenhouse gas inventory, and 5.5 times the number from a separate global database. This is so problematic, Lewis, for a whole bunch of different reasons. First of all, yet again, we see that the EPA databases are often based on decade-old methodology that don't actually take into consideration what the real pollution emissions are today. So that's a problem, number one. But number two, we have to understand the scope of these methane leaks, because this is going to determine whether moving from coal to gas-fired, natural gas-fired electricity actually is a net benefit for climate change. And it's widely considered that from the non-renewables, natural gas is not clean, but the cleanest. What that doesn't take into consideration, though, is the leaking of methane that can take place here. And the greenhouse gas effect of methane is so huge that even small leaks, Lewis, can be significantly more impactful than CO2 leaks. Methane is 86 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas on the 20-year time scale. So even though the burning of natural gas in principle is the cleanest non-renewable, and we should be getting away from non-renewables anyway, when you take into consideration that there are usually at some point small leaks of methane gas from these natural gas operations, that can actually completely counter impact the so-called relative cleanliness of natural gas.
Yeah, and that's not the only problem with fracking. There's the earthquakes. There's the reservoirs full of nasty water that seemingly in every case leak out and in some cases contaminate public drinking supplies.
Right.
And I guess you have the overall carbon footprint of that industry as well. So, Dave, no, it's terrible. It's not clean.
We've got to get off this stuff.
Got to get off it.
At this point, what are we doing? What are we doing? I just don't understand how long we're going to be doing this. And I guess probably at least as long as the subsidies continue. That we can be absolutely sure of. The FBI has just released their annual review of hate crimes for 2014. It took a look at almost it took almost a full year to compile all of this data, and we now have it. And overall, the biggest driver for hate crimes is race, not religion. But when we look at religious hate crimes, Jews are once again the biggest targets in America. It is not even close. Take a look at this. 59% of religious hate crimes were anti-Jewish. Following that, in a distant second, are anti-Muslim hate crimes at 14%. And then you will see anti-Catholic at 6%, anti-multiple religions at 4%, anti-Protestant 4%. 1 out of every 100 religiously motivated hate crimes, Lewis, is an anti-atheist hate crime, which is interesting in and of itself. So the good news here, hate crimes overall down by almost 8% from 2013 in 2014. Bad news, hate crimes against Muslims are up 14% from 2013. That might not surprise anybody. But the big revelation here, once again, by leaps and bounds, a majority of religion-related hate crimes are anti-Jewish hate crimes. And remember that we know this is a database compiled by the FBI based on reports by local police departments. We know that with police shootings of people, Lewis, we can't rely on the local police departments to actually report the data to the FBI. So this data may actually be vastly understating the problem with religious hate crimes.
Could be, yeah, but the results to me are not really surprising. I think that if you were to go across much of Europe, you would have similar results. And I mean, at least we can say that overall there's fewer hate crimes, right?
Yeah, I mean, fewer hate crimes in 2014 than in 2013. That's good. Still, as we've mentioned many, many times, people underestimate anti-Semitism. People underestimate how it's more acceptable to be anti-Semitic and to say anti-Semitic things in the U.S. than it is to be anti a lot of other stuff. And this is a reality. These statistics show us that exact same thing. And of course, anytime we look at results like this, there are complications. I mean, we have the Muslim religion, which is often but not always correlated with non-Jewish Semitic ethnicity. So ethnicity, religion, many, many times are linked. The Jewish religion versus Jewish ethnicity and Jewish culture. So this can be very, very complex. And if someone is Jewish but not religious, then is that an anti-ethnic hate crime, or is that an anti-religious hate crime? I don't really know. It is complicated, but what we know, Lewis, is that time and again, it is confirmed that it is more acceptable to be anti-Semitic in this country than it is to be anti a lot of other stuff. And most people would be shocked to hear that the overwhelming majority of anti-religion hate crimes are anti-Jewish. Most people would not guess that.
Yeah, I think, Dave, I don't think it's unusual for the smallest minorities to be the most targeted because they're the least understood. And yeah, I guess, to me, that's how it feels. But what I would like to see is take each slice of this pie chart that we put up and let's determine, okay, let's take all hate crimes against Jews, for example. What percentages are committed by people of what other religion?
That would be very interesting. Yeah. So it would be interesting if, for example, a vast majority of the religious hate crimes against Jews were being committed by, just hypothetically, white people. But then we look at the vast majority of anti-religious hate crimes against Catholics maybe are committed by Muslims. Total hypothetical, no reason to think that's the real data. That would actually be very, very interesting. And I don't know that we have access to that data.
No.
After the break, we will talk to Chauncey DeVega. Are Donald Trump rallies becoming safe spaces for racism? That is next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Chauncey DeVega, who's a contributing writer for Salon and Alternet. His essays on race, politics, and popular culture can be found at chaunceyDeVega.com. He's also on Twitter and Facebook. Chauncey, it's great to have you on. You've been exploring this question in detail of whether these ideas that we're hearing from Donald Trump, the racist and xenophobic ideas, if these are sort of outliers that don't really fit within what the Republican electorate likes or believes, or whether Donald Trump is actually channeling the racism and xenophobia that may already exist within the electorate. So let's go back to the beginning. Talk to us about how you first started exploring, in fact, with an article called or an article exploring whether Donald Trump rallies are so-called safe spaces for racism. How did you first come across this issue?
Well, I've been writing about Donald Trump for some time. Actually, my first foray at the Donald was really looking at his style of rhetoric and performance. And I wrote a piece of Salon on my own site, ChaunceyDeVega.com, basically saying that he's a professional wrestling character. If you think about his rhetoric, his language, he did time actually supporting the World Wrestling Federation. I'm a huge, huge professional wrestling fan, have watched my whole life. And I said, my goodness, he's really a performance artist. But then it became abundantly clear that he's not just a reality TV show carnival barker, which he is, but he really is a proto-fascist in a lot of ways. And for me, the moment that really crystallized it, never mind his statements about Muslims, his statements about Hispanics and Latinos being rapists who carry razors who want to rape white women, that's right out of 19th century know-nothing rhetoric right there. That's the yellow journalism of the 19th and early 20th centuries. But when he had that rally where his supporters assaulted a Black Lives Matter supporter,
right,
and they were yelling all lives matter, which is really a de facto way of saying white power. All lives matter is the new white power for all intents and purposes. It really became clear that Trump's rallies are safe spaces for racism and for xenophobia. And if you look at the public opinion data, if you look at all the research that's been done about racial attitudes, the Southern strategy, for years, actually, I've been saying that conservatism and racism are one and the same thing. That's right out of the political science literature on the subject. So Donald Trump is really just the base of the Republican Party, unrestrained. He's their id, basically telling us who they have always been and will continue to be in this age of changing demographics.
And I want to dig in specifically to some of the specific issues that are sort of being alluded to by Trump's ideas. But to go back to the first issue you talked about, which is sort of Trump's demeanor and his presence, for all the disagreements I obviously have with the man about the policy ideas he's presented, and obviously I think he's completely unqualified to be leading this country, of course, he is very, very good at taking what are fundamentally outrageous ideas and presenting them in a way where they sound sort of logical and inoffensive, right? Listen, I have plenty of Muslim friends, blah, blah, blah. We just got to get this thing figured out, right? We need to figure out what's going on, was the phrase he kept repeating, and that was in his statement on this new idea to ban Muslim travel to the United States. Even in his criticisms, for example, referring to Jeb Bush as a low-energy guy, it's actually a really interesting way in which Donald Trump has taken both criticisms and policy ideas that make no sense and he presents them in a way that I understand why they are actually resonating with people, even though I recognize I don't agree with any of them.
Well, absolutely. You know, he's emotional. His body language, as I said, he's a student of professional wrestling. And actually some sociolinguists, the New York Times had a cover story on this. They analyzed, I think they did about 25,000 or 50,000 words from his speeches and presentations. And they said he's a classic authoritarian fascist demagogue. What he does is he talks in simple terms of us and them, terms about safety and protection. He's really, really smart in terms of reaching out to people's insecurities and making them feel safe. And because he's so vague in his language, that allows the listener and the viewer to fill in all those gaps with their dreams, their hopes, and really their anxieties. And I was on the RT yesterday, and I'm going to double down on this. My real concern is what happens when Donald Trump supporters, because we know the number one threat to the U.S. security right now is right-wing domestic terrorism. What happens when those angry, disaffected people who have been mobilized? We know that white supremacists are recruiting. They have been recruiting at Tea Party rallies. They certainly have infiltrated these groups. White supremacists are endorsing Donald Trump. Where are all these angry, disaffected, really, really belligerent voters going to go? That's what's scaring the hell out of me.
Well, so far, I mean, when we talk about positive comments from the white supremacist KKK types in this election about candidates, we're only hearing them talk about Donald Trump. In other words, they're either not a factor. We're just not hearing white supremacists say anything positive or negative about Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or whoever, Jeb Bush, etc. It's just shows of support for the ideas presented by Donald Trump. And I'd be curious to know from you, Chauncey, who's been following and writing about Trump for a while now, do you think Trump even personally believes the stuff that he's been presenting on the campaign? Arguably, it doesn't even matter. If it's part of what he says is his campaign platform, it is. But when he says, for example, that he's personally very much against abortion, do we actually have any reason to think that that's true, or that that's just a political posturing move?
I mean, as you said, if he means it, it's sort of irrelevant at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because words are actions. I don't know. His father was reportedly in the KKK. One of his ex-wives said the man keeps a copy of Mein Kampf near the bed.
Right.
But I wasn't there, and I don't know. But I will say this, though. I think that he believes it to the degree that he knows it's a viable political strategy. And again, I've gone to white supremacist websites for years. And years ago, years in the sense of 5 or 6 years ago, they had a series of posts. I want to identify the website that basically outlined how a white conservative politician could use white racial animus in a time of changing demographics to win the White House. Basically, you shrink the electorate, which the Republican Party is doing. You go to the courts. You kill the federal government, as Grover Norquist said. You make it so weak you can drown it in the bathtub. You activate white racial resentment and white identity politics, and you put a polite face on it. And Donald Trump is taking that and combining it with it's a concept called right-wing producerism. Very old concept in terms of right-wing populism. And he knows that this is a way that he can get into the primaries, certainly, and maybe have a brokered convention. He won't win, but again, his voters don't know that. These are very, very disillusioned, low-information voters who are going to be angry as hell.
Yeah, that's an understatement if I've ever heard one. And we're actually going to be addressing this issue of populism is not just left-wing. We're going to talk with an expert on this from the New School Economics Department about left-wing versus right-wing populism in a couple of weeks. I think it'll be interesting. With regard to the Trump rallies, okay, when we see the video you talked about, for example, the Black Lives Matter protester being beaten and then dragged out, and the video is just insane. We played it. A number of other examples of the white power screams and shouts at Trump rallies, etc. Do you think that Trump is in any way growing this sort of white nationalist movement, or is he simply attracting the elements of the right that were already part of that movement and sort of coalescing them?
I think he's making it more polite. I think he's making it more respectable. And we really live in a complex and vexing moment. You have a president who happens to be black. Obama's not the country's first black president. He's a president who happens to be black. He's really a neoliberal Rockefeller Republican, but the white right hates him with a level of animus and rage that can only be traced to racial resentment and overt racism. Again, we have a lot of public opinion research and social psychology research on that question.
Yeah.
But I think that we overestimated the levels of tolerance, of inclusion, and the decline of overt white racism in this country. So racism moved from the front stage to the backstage. And that's really one of the accomplishments of the civil rights movement. And racial attitudes have changed. But I think Donald Trump and the Republican Party, again, because the Republican Party is built on the Southern strategy. Its electorate is almost 100% white. It uses the politics of white racial resentment. And Donald Trump is sort of turning over the apple cart, so to speak, because he's showing the public what the magic trick is. And he's saying, I'm not going to play along anymore. I'm going to mobilize the base I know we already have, and I'm going to give these angry, white, racially resentful voters who are scared of economic change, as we all are, scared of demographic change, and feel that they're obsolete in a changing America, I'm going to give them a voice. They're not going to win, but they're still going to cause chaos.
Last thing I want to get your thoughts on is new USA Today poll, Suffolk University poll, says that 68% of Trump supporters claim they would vote for him if he did not run as a Republican and ran instead as an independent. Do you see any connection between that high level of willingness to support Trump above the Republican Party to the fact that he is coalescing this xenophobic white nationalist movement? Is there any conclusion we can draw from that?
I think as I said, we're heading to a brokered convention likely. He's a George Wallace type. I'm not so sure his voters will actually turn out and participate. When you have these third-party candidates, especially a French candidate like Trump, they're going to tell the pollsters, yeah, I'm going to vote. But when you drill down into the data, very often they don't participate. And again, as I said, the quote-unquote respectable wing, the adults in the room in the Republican Party, they're scared. But again, they created this monster with Fox News and the right-wing echo chamber. So the establishment Republicans are running away from this guy. But here's the dilemma. You've seen this with Cruz, with Rubio, with Bush. They're going to have to chase him. And they're going to have to go out there and use this racially resentful, overt bigotry. I think it was Cruz who said last week that a majority of violent criminals are Democrats.
Right.
If I haven't heard a racial appeal, I don't know if it's stupefying. So they're going to have to chase him. And that's going to be the puzzle. How far will they chase him in order to win over his base? Or are they just hoping that those voters will then convert back to the candidate who's nominated for the party, which they likely will not?
Chauncey DeVega, he hosts a weekly podcast, The Chauncey DeVega Show, and you can also read more of his writing at chaunceyDeVega.com. Great to have you on today. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
A terrorist plot by a white supremacist appears to have been foiled when the white supremacist blew off his own leg preparing a bomb. Michael O'Neill, a former Niagara County, New York corrections officer, apparently was trying to use a hot glue gun to seal the fuse on one of many bombs that he was building in his stepfather's garage when something went very, very wrong. Police believe that the fuse on this improvised explosive device, quote, may have caught fire, and that O'Neill tried to stomp the fire out with his feet, which caused the bomb to explode, blowing his foot off. He was transported by air to a local hospital where his leg was ultimately amputated as a result of his injuries. Several homemade bombs were found. Police found an array of white supremacist propaganda, including stuff distributed by the Ku Klux Klan and by Nazis. One of O'Neill's homemade bombs was labeled powder with nails, and an x-ray of it actually showed that it was packed with nails, which you can just imagine, Lewis, if that were to explode, what type of damage it would do. Flash powder was found at the home in the garage, potassium perchlorate, 36 shotgun shells, reloaded with fragments inside. Again, really depraved preparation for some kind of horrible attack, police suspect. What may be the most disturbing part of this entire thing is that there are no terrorism charges being pursued, and police are saying we are not calling this particular investigation a terrorist investigation. What we do have, we believe, is serious enough possession manufacturing of explosive devices. White supremacist caught red-handed building a bunch of bombs in his garage. At least one of the bombs is packed with nails. Yeah, it just seems like there's nothing terroristic going on here. If this guy were Muslim, if they found a Muslim guy, if they found a guy named Syed Farouk in a garage of his Muslim stepfathers making all of this stuff, would there be a terrorism investigation?
I think there immediately would be, yes, but there would also be the assumption that this person has links,
right?
That somehow there's a connection, there's a cell, there's some type of group activity, and I think maybe people in these cases tend, like the one we're talking about here, tend to think, okay, it's a white supremacist. He was up to no good. He's a lone wolf.
White supremacists have never been violent, right? I mean, no need to worry.
Well, certainly plenty of reason to worry about domestic white supremacist terrorists. But it is a different mentality when the guy's name is John Smith or whatever.
Yeah, O'Neill. I mean, there's a name you're not often going to see immediately associated with terror, although that doesn't mean it shouldn't be. And we'll continue to follow the story, see what ultimately happens. Is the leg being blown off punishment enough already?
No way. Let's throw this guy behind bars for a long time.
I told you a couple of weeks ago that China is moving ahead very quickly with an animal cloning farm. The farm will cost $31 million. It'll be located in a government-sponsored business area about 100 miles from Beijing. What we didn't tell you a couple of weeks ago, which has now surfaced, is that CEO Zhu Xiaohun has said that they are also interested, they are not ruling out the idea of exploring human cloning. The firm does not currently engage in human cloning, but they say that it is certainly something that BoyleLife would consider looking into. The CEO said the technology is already there. If this is allowed, I don't think there are other companies better than BoyleLife that make better technology. The firm, again, does not currently do human cloning, that they are admitting, but Zhu says that they have to be self-restrained because of possible adverse reaction. Basically saying, Lewis, if it were up to them, they'd be doing human cloning already. They have the technology to do human cloning, but it's because of the reaction they're concerned with that they claim they haven't been doing it yet. Social values can change, but it is true that right now human cloning is looked at as something we don't want to be doing, really.
And I don't really see it that way. I don't see the big deal. It just depends on how it's done. And I guess that's pretty much all I can say about it, right? I mean, there are moral and ethical ways to go about it, I think. And do I think that this company in China will be doing that? I don't know.
Well, Zhu said that one of the biggest positives that could come from human cloning is that, as he says, currently the only way to have a child is to have it be half its mom and half its dad. Maybe in the future, you would have 3 choices instead of 1. You either have 50-50, or you have a choice of having the genetics be 100% from dad or 100% from mom, or maybe they could be from more than 2 people, etc. There's also a South Korean company called Suam, which is working on a project to bring back the woolly mammoth from extinction. And they also have technology which could go a long way towards human cloning. The pros are sort of generally considered we could clone out defective genes. We could eliminate defective genes, I think is a better way to say it. Faster recovery from traumatic injury could be seen. Infertility could be eliminated. Anybody who wants to have a kid could have a kid. And of course, the cons, possibly faster aging. So far in cloned animals, we've seen a lower life expectancy and faster aging. Maybe that could be fixed. And from the moral and ethical standpoint, reduced sense of individuality, maybe a reduced sense of the value of human life, if any individual can essentially be recreated. And I think those, Lewis, are a lot of the moral and ethical dilemmas that the human race is going to be faced with in the next 5 to 10 years.
You're telling me that we could have an even lower value on human life?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. I am shocked. I didn't think that could get any lower.
It can. And some say it would happen if we were to allow human cloning. Send me your thoughts on this. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail I received.
David Packman. This is Lonzo Hicks calling from Bossier City, Louisiana. Way down south in Dixie.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell did I call you for?
Okay. Is that for real, Lewis? I mean, I don't know. This guy sounds very, very nice. Sounds like a super nice guy. But I could see that being a satirical voicemail on a number of levels.
I think it's real. I think he might have had a few drinks or a few puffs and just forgot Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
It does happen.
Yeah.
219-2-DAVID-P is our voicemail number. Call anytime. Maybe write down the topic so you remember when you call. On the bonus show today, we will talk to you about the latest studio updates, a lot going on. We will talk about a squirrel attack in San Francisco, and we will talk about Icelandic people flocking to a particular religion as a protest move. What religion is it? Lewis will tell us, and he will also tell us whether he is converting. He's a big fan of Iceland, but I don't know if I see him converting at this point. DavidPakman.com/membership. Get the free 2016 Hatriot Mail calendar with your membership at DavidPakman.com/calendar16. I will speak to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com.